Hello everybody. In this video we will be talking about the portfolio management problem. This problem is in a handout which is online, so make sure that you go take a look at the handout. I'm going to go over the problem. We'll do the formulation and Excel solution. Now I might split up the formulation and Excel solution into two separate videos, but we'll see. Right, so John Sweeney is an investment advisor who want to construct an optimal portfolio for a client who has $400,000 to invest. There are 10 different investments that fall into 4 different categories. Right, and the investments and their important characteristics are listed. So you'll notice that there is something called the liquidity factor and then something called the risk factor. So you have the liquidity factor and risk factor, and we will keep track of that. Now, note that Unidad Corp is a single investment that Unidad Corp under equities and Unidad Corp under bonds are two different investments. This is you're investing in the company stocks itself. Here you are buying bonds from the company, or basically giving the money, loaning some money to the company. But First General REIT, you'll notice that it is there in equities and real estate, but that's a single investment that is considered both a equity investment and a real estate investment. All right, so Unidad Corp, there are two different Unidad Corp, two types of investments in Unidad Corp. You have equities and debt. There's a single investment in a REIT, that's a First General REIT, and that's both a equity investment and a real estate investment. Right, so there are 10 investments in total. So you have to formulate a linear programming problem to achieve John's objectives given these portfolio limitations. Right? So we'll go through the portfolio limitations, put them down as constraints, and set up this problem and go from there. Now, one of the things that I'm going to do is, like all of these finance problems, especially with portfolio management sort of problems, I am going to, so there are two ways of going about it. We can define decision variables as actual dollar values, or we can define decision variables as a percentage of investments. So I'm going to go with percentage of investments as my decision variable, and the main reason for that is the liquidity factor and the risk factor constraints. It just makes them easier, right? So open up a PowerPoint file. And let's begin. So the first step is always decision variables. We'll begin with the decision variables. So in this case, there are 10 decision variables because there are 10 investments. So let me put them down here so that I can. Right. So what are my decision variables? I'm going to say UCS for the percentage of investment in Unidad Corp stocks, right? Percentage of investment in Unidad Corp stocks, that's UCS. Then you have CC is a percentage of investment in CC restaurants. Right? Then FG is the percentage of investment in this is First General REIT. Similarly, you're going to have Metropolitan Electric. I'm going to stop writing the thing. So you have Unidad Corp bonds. So I have UCS and UCB. But you know what? I don't need the C. I'll just say US and UB. I'll just use two letters for all my decision variables. So again, this is the percentage of, and similarly UCB is the percentage of, right? Yeah, UB is for Unidad bonds. Similarly, you'll have Louisville Transit, Realty partners. We don't have to do first general REIT again because it's the same investment. Then you have a T-bill account, a money market fund, and a saver certificate. So again, I'm just going to make that this one 2 letters for all of these. Makes our life easier, right? So all of these are percentage of, and percentage of. Finally, that. So these are all my decision variables, right? So these are my 10 decision variables: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. They're all percentage of the investments in each of these 10 different 10 different portfolio options that we have, right? So that's step 1. Step 2 is the objective. In this case, the objective is clear because it says so here. John's objective as which is to construct a portfolio that maximizes his client's total expected after-tax return. So this is the total expected after-tax returns. So you have to maximize that. So the objective is to maximize US times 15%. So let's put that 15% times US plus 17% times UCC plus 17.5% times FG for general REIT plus 11.8% times Metropolitan Electric plus 12.2% times, actually, I don't know why I did that. 12.2 times Unidad bonds plus 22% times realty partners plus 9.6% times the T-bill account plus 10.5% times the money market fund plus 12.6% times the saver certificate. Let me extend that further. Right. So that's our objective function. These also, but remember these are all percentages. So technically speaking, you can multiply the whole thing with 400,000. That'll give you the actual return because this is percentage times percentage, percentage times percentage. So these are all percentages, basically percentages of the overall. So that's the objective. So you can write the times 400,000. You don't have to write the 400,000. You'll end up with the exact same answer. Okay. Next, after we do the objective, the next are the constraints. So the constraints are all the portfolio limitations. So let's write the constraints. Now, in this case, a couple of things. There is one hidden constraint here, obviously, because all of these are percentages of total investments. They all have to add up to 1. So I'm just going to say US plus CC plus FG plus SC. So these are all the percentages. They all have to add up to 1. That's the first constraint. Now, the second constraint is the weighted average liquidity factor for the portfolio must be at least 65. So the liquidity factor constraint has to be at least 65. Now this is where writing these as percentages makes sense. Because we wrote them as percentages, we have some leeway here, and I'll tell you what that is. So let's put on this. Okay, liquidity factors are right there. So you have liquidity factor must be at least 65. So you want it to be at least 65% liquid, I guess. So liquidity factor is 100 times US plus 100 times CC plus 100 times FG. Those are the liquidity factors for the stocks, plus 95 times Metropolitan Electric, plus 92 times United Bonds, plus 79 times Louisville Transit, plus 0. So you can either skip Realty Partners. I'm just going to say 0 times Realty Partners. Very likely here this is an investment in some sort of building, so you cannot easily liquidate it. Plus 80 times the T-bill account, plus 100 times the money market fund, and finally a 0 times a saver certificate. So 0 times saver certificate. So this is the left hand side of this constraint. So the weighted average liquidity factor. It's called weighted average because instead of just taking a simple average, you're going to take a weighted average. What you would usually do is you divide this by the sum of all the variables. So to find the weighted average, you multiply the weight with the value, the weight with the value, the weight with the value, and so on. And then you divide by the sum of all the variables. Now, because the sum of all the variables adds up to 1, you don't have to divide by 1. Now, let's say that instead of these being percentages of investments, we had actually made them dollar values. Then you would have to write all of this is greater than or equal to 65 times the sum of all the variables. But because we wrote them as percentages, sum of all variables equal to 1 makes our life easier. So the portfolio must be at least, the liquidity must be at least 65. So it's greater than or equal to 65. That's the first constraint. Similarly, we have like the liquidity factor, we also have the risk factor, and risk factor must be no greater than 55. So it'll be 60 times US plus 70 times CC. So stocks give are liquid, could give returns, but they are also pretty risky. 70 times TCC, 75 times FG, plus 20 times ME, plus 30 times LT, plus 22 times 30 times UB, plus 22 times LT, plus 50 times RP. Real estate ventures are always risky. 0 times TB, there's no risk with T-bill accounts. There's a very small risk with the money market fund, plus there's no risk with the saver certificate. So all of this has to be less than or equal to 55. Again, if you are doing a weighted average, you'd on the right hand side you'd multiply with the sum of all the variables, but sum of all variables as well. Okay. Right. So next, let's begin with the portfolio limitation number 3. No more than 60,000 to be invested in unitized stocks or bonds. So total amount of investment in unitized stocks or bonds can be no more than 60,000. So we say, so the investment in unitized stocks is US, right? That's the percentage, plus the investment in unitized bonds is UB, so plus UB, times, so all of this times 400,000, because that's the amount of money, so it's percentage of that money. So this is the total amount of money that you invest in unitized stocks or bonds, and this cannot be more than 60,000, right? Cannot be no more than 60,000, right? And it says no more than 40% of the investment can be in any one category except the money category. So this time we're talking about the categories. There are 4 categories: stocks, bonds, real estate, and money market fund. So it can be no more than 40% of investment in any single category. So let's first write the stocks. So you're saying that US plus CC plus FG, which is the total percentage of investment in stocks, this cannot exceed 40%. Similarly, ME plus UB plus LT, right? ME plus UB plus LT. So this is all the investments in bonds. This also cannot exceed 40%. Right. Okay. Now let's see. You know what? I'll take the last two. I'll put them in the next slide. All right. Next is the real estate. So remember, first general works as both. So RP plus FG again has to be less than or equal to 40%. And finally, the money market fund. So there's no constraint of the money market fund because you can invest more than 40% in money market fund. In the money category. Money category. So no more than 20% of the total investment can be in any single investment. So now this had three constraints because we didn't have to write for money. We had to write one constraint for stock, one for bonds, and one for real estate. Similarly, we had to write a constraint for every single investment except for the money market fund, saying that you cannot put more than 20% in any single investment. Right, so you say US is less than or equal to 20%, CC is less than or equal to 20%, right? Then first general is less than or equal to 20%, ME is less than or equal to 20%, UB, LT, RP, then you have TB, money market, there's no constraint, then you have SC. All of this has to be less than or equal to 20%, less than or equal to 20%, less than or equal to 20%, right? So these are all constraint number 5. So we have constraint number, so this is the hidden constraint, this is the first constraint, this is the second one, this is the third one, these 3 are the fourth one, and these 9 are the fifth constraint. Now let's look at the sixth constraint. At least $1,000 must be invested in the money market fund. So it's a minimum of $1,000. So money market fund times 400,000 because it's a percentage has to be greater than or equal to 1,000, right? Minimum. So this is the percentage times the total amount of money. So this is how much money invest in the money market fund. It has to be at least $1,000. The maximum investment in saver certificate is 15,000. So again, saver certificate times 400,000 is less than or equal to 15,000. Minimum amount in desired for debt is 90,000. So you want to invest at least 90,000 in debt. So we know that this is the debt. You're saying that this is the total amount invested in debt. So multiply this with 400,000. So this is the total amount. So this is the percentage in debt, total amount of money in debt, and this has to be at least 90,000, right? Before we have a restriction that it has to be less than 40,000. Now it is at least 90,000. And finally, at least $10,000 must be put in the T-bill account. So you say T-bill account times 400,000. So this is the percentage in T-bill account times 400,000 has to be at least 10,000. Right? And those are all our constraints. So we have like 9 different portfolio limitations, and the 10th one saying because everything has to add up to 1. But within each of that, we had so many different constraints. So this is it. So we have all our constraints. Obviously, non-negativity is always a constraint. And when I'm getting the C. So non-negativity is a constraint. In this case, obviously, the variables are not going to be integers because they're going to be percentages. So they're definitely not going to be integers. So we don't need the integer constraint. So what we'll now do now is we'll put this into Excel and we'll solve it. So the video is already 20 minutes long. So I'm going to stop the video here. I'm going to make a separate video where I do the Excel solution.